Hey folks, this is Keough with a new video log for you, and this is going to be an informative video log in which I tackle the question of what to do when your training has stalled out and you don't know exactly how to address it. So what I'm going to provide to you in this video is a progression of questions that you should ask yourself when you get into a position in which you've either ceased to make the progress that you want to be making or your lifting has stalled. Okay, so I hope this is really helpful for you. Enjoy. Okay, the first question that you need to ask yourself is, am I overreacting? Okay. Oftentimes when I hear somebody say that they want to change something with their programming, when they want to change something with their training because they're not happy with the progress they're making, the first question you should always ask yourself is, am I overreacting? Am I just being greedy and or impatient with my progress? Am I making progress? I think is another question that you should ask yourself when you get into a position like this, okay? If you're making progress, don't screw it up. Don't mess with it, okay? Continue to make progress until you cease to do so, and then start making changes with your training. Otherwise, leave things the way they are, enjoy it, it doesn't last forever. The second question I would ask, if you find that you're not overreacting, that your lifting has stalled out, okay, or that you're struggling with your lifting, the second question that I would ask is always, does your technique require improvements? In other words, are you lifting with imperfect technique, okay? The first change that I always try to make in somebody's lifting when they've ceased to make progress is of a technical nature. Okay, so we always look at technique first. If the technique isn't perfect, we work on fixing that technique. Okay, so take a good look at your technique and be honest with yourself, be objective with what you say. Do you need to make technical improvements in order to make progress? If the answer is yes, then you need to make those improvements before you can do anything else. All right, the third question that I would ask, if the answer to the first two is no, is I would ask you to ask yourself, what does my strength curve look like, okay? And your strength curve, simply it refers to the amount of force that you produce over the duration of a concentric portion of a lift, okay? In other words, we all have fast, quote-unquote, fast and slow points in our lifts. And if you watch me lift a lot, for instance, on my deadlift, I'm really fast off the floor, but then I'm really slow at lockout, okay? So what you want to do is you want to identify the slow point in your lift, okay? And once you've identified that slow point, you want to ask yourself the subsequent question, which is, what is causing that slow point? And usually it is one of three things, okay? It is either, number one, technical related, okay? It's either related to your technique. Number two, it's related to a particular muscle weakness, okay? Or number three, it's psychological in nature, all right? For technique, just to give you an example, when we talk about deadlift technique and when we talk about what is ideal or optimal for deadlift technique, a good starting position for a deadlift is antithetical to a good starting position for the lockout of a deadlift, okay? So in other words, in order to generate speed off the floor on the deadlift, you would have to do the opposite of the things you want to do in order to put yourself in a good position for lockout, okay? When you watch me pull, I pull with a more narrow stance, okay? I use a more rounded back, I keep my hips higher, I let my knees come a little bit further forward. That allows me to generate a lot of force off the floor, okay? But it makes, once I get past my knees, for really poor position at my lockout, okay? Another lifter might pull with their shins perpendicular to the floor. They might pull with their hips lower. They might pull with a neutral spine, okay? They might pull with their hips back further than me. And oftentimes these lifters will be very slow off the floor on their deadlifts. But once they get that bar past their knees, they're in great position to lock weights out, okay? That's simply what I mean by assessing your strength curve weaknesses or your slow points by looking at your own technique, okay? Maybe you're putting yourself in a bad position to execute that portion of the concentric, okay? And what you'd want to do is you'd want to make technical changes that even out your strength curve, okay? So for my deadlift, you've seen me take my stance and move it out, I'd say a good 3 or 4 inches for each foot, okay? And that has allowed me to sacrifice some of the speed that I was generating off of the floor for better positioning at lockout. And as long as the net gain is worth it, and for me it has been because I've been pulling stronger than ever before, as long as the net gain is worth it, you want to make those technical changes, okay? You want to get to a point in which your technique is such that it allows for an even strength curve that produces the biggest net result, which is the biggest 1 rep max possible, okay? If the issue is based on muscle weakness, oftentimes you'll see it in a particular slow point. So let's say again, I'm pulling with pretty good positioning for locking a weight out off the floor, and I get it past my knees, and I just cannot bring my hips through. It could be weak hip flexors, it could be weak glutes, okay? So in that instance, a weak lockout might not be related to bad positioning at lockout. It might be instead related to particular muscle group weaknesses, okay? So if you don't think it's technical, then it's probably a weak muscle group or weak muscle groups, okay? And I'll talk in a little bit about how to address that. Number 3, this is usually not the case, but I think for most beginning and intermediate lifters, it's important for them to self-assess their rate of force development anyway. It could be psychological, okay? Beginning and intermediate lifters oftentimes just don't understand what it means to pull or push or squat a weight as fast as possible. They don't understand what maximal force production feels like, okay? So if you think it's number 3, just go back, look at your lifting, and ask yourself, am I doing everything as fast as I can possibly do it within reason? And within reason just means if you're a beginning or an intermediate lifter, am I doing things as fast as possible while maintaining good technique still? And if the answer is no, then you want to address that. Alright, so if you're fixing a slow point on your strength curve and you want to do so through technical changes, the first thing I think you want to do is you want to go in and you want to experiment with different techniques and see how that affects your strength curve, okay? So again, taking deadlifting as an example, if you're fast off the floor and you're slow at lockout, look at your starting position on the deadlift, okay? And if you pull like I do with a narrow stance and a rounded back and you're a conventional puller and all of this stuff, consider going in and making technical changes that will be more conducive to better positioning at lockout. Go in, try it out, and see if it makes you stronger, okay? So I would experiment with that for a little while, all right? The second thing I would do is I would look at your individual leverages and I would ask myself, am I taking the fullest advantage possible of my leverages, okay? The easiest way to answer this question is to go onto YouTube, go onto training logs, identify people who are stronger than you that have similar builds and similar leverages to you, okay? You might not have the exact same physiques, but look for somebody who looks like you, okay? Can be male or female. Identify that person and then look at how they perform the lifts, okay? And look at their strength curves, okay? Look at how, and analyze closely how they use their bodies in order to perform these lifts and generate as much force as possible throughout the movement. Once you identify someone who you think is doing something that you're not doing, you can start to emulate that person in training. And that's a really good and easy way for you to pick up some tips on how to improve your technique. So to give you an example, Janice Finkelman, my girlfriend, we work a lot on her deadlift technique and producing optimal deadlift technique. And so what we've done is we've identified lifters who have similar leverages to her, and she has very unique leverages. But we've watched in the past a lot of both Kimberly Alford and also Tom Eisman, who in both instances, these are lifters with leverages that are very similar to hers. And so she can pick up a lot by looking at and trying to emulate these lifters, because these are world-class deadlifters who are built similarly to her. So by analyzing how better lifters use their bodies, better lifters who look like you, by analyzing how they use their bodies in order to perform these lifts, you can better understand what is quote-unquote best for you. Alright, so let's say you have a weakness or a slow point in your strength curve, and you think it's related to a particular muscle weakness, weakness of a particular muscle group, and you don't know exactly how to address it. I'm going to give you 3 ways in descending order in which you can address a muscle group weakness, okay? And we're going to start from the most foolproof, and we're going to end at the sort of least foolproof, but potentially the one with the biggest payoff. If you think, so let's say you're deadlifting, you get past your knees, you can't lock anything out, and you're like, why is this happening to me? If you think it is related to a particular muscle group weakness, but you don't know what muscle exactly, you're not exactly sure, and people are giving you different things, and you're not sure what to do with it, first thing you should do is take a movement-based approach to fixing that weakness, okay? So when in doubt, do the main movement for hypertrophy. Just hammer it and kill it with reps, okay? So if you're deadlifting and you're weak past your knees, deadlift a lot with sub-max weight, do long sets, do it in place of your other hypertrophy work, and just hammer that for a few months and see what happens. See if it improves your deadlift lockout. If you think you have a movement variant or movement variance, so if you think you have some sort of an idea of what the problem is, okay, so I'm weak past my knees and I think maybe it's my glutes, but I'm not exactly sure, okay, but that's what I think it is, all right, find a movement variant that you think will target that weakness, okay, and by movement variant, I simply just mean another compound movement that is a take or is a modification of one of the 3 big lifts, squat, bench press, deadlift, okay? And so for my deadlift, like let's say I think I have a weak lockout and I want to fix that, maybe I start doing Romanians, okay, as a way to address it, all right? So it's not a deadlift, but I'm doing a variation on a deadlift that I think will help develop that particular weakness, okay? You would do this if you were a little bit more sure in your answer, okay? If you really think you know what it is, so if you're positive it's weak glutes, it's got to be weak glutes, that's the only thing holding my deadlift back, then you want to take a muscle-based approach to fixing your weaknesses, okay? And in that instance, you're going to do other exercises, special exercises, potentially accessory exercises or isolation lifts that will target that particular muscle group, okay? So you're looking for special exercises that have high muscle fiber recruitment for that particular muscle group, all right? If I think it's weak glutes, I might do for a few months glute ham raises and just do them to death and try to get as good in them as possible, okay? Now, if you're correct, it's likely to carry over to the main movement, okay? If you're incorrect, you've just wasted your time. All right, so oftentimes I find that a movement-based approach, just doing more deadlifting to get a better deadlift lockout, That's more foolproof in that it will usually work, but it will take more time, okay? A muscle-based approach is far less foolproof, okay? It's subject to more trial and error, but if you get it right, it can pay off a lot faster, okay? You can develop a weakness by targeting it specifically. You can develop it a lot faster than with a movement-based approach. All right, so if you don't think the issue is with your strength curve, if you don't think you have a particular physical weakness, the next thing that I would suggest for you is you look at your mobility and your flexibility for the particular lifts that you're stalling out on, okay? So ask yourself, am I doing enough mobility work? Am I doing enough flexibility work? Am I simply just not physically prepared in order to perform these lifts as they need to be performed? Is that what's holding me back? And if the answer is yes, then obviously you need to implement that into the work that you do outside of training. Okay, so let's say you think the issue is not physical at all, and so if you don't think the issue is physical, then it is likely that the issue is related to your programming itself, okay? And so the question that you want to ask yourself is, what does my programming look like, and do I have to manipulate my programming in order to continue to get stronger, okay? Before you start analyzing your programming, ask yourself in all honesty, do I have a program? Do I have a program that doesn't suck, okay? Most people who train in gyms don't have programs, okay? They just kind of go in and train by feel day after day, all right? If that's what you're doing and you're not making progress, you need some sort of programming. You need some sort of planned progression. Whatever that template is, you need something, okay? So the first thing you do is you get a program, okay? Get on somebody else's program. Don't try and make your own until you have a good understanding of how to make your own programming. If you do have a program, if even you're making your own programming and you're kind of stuck with what you should do with your programming, my suggestion is to look at these 4 qualities. Look at the volume of your programming, look at the frequency of your programming, look at the intensity of your programming, and look at the average rate of perceived exertion of your programming, okay? Analyze those 4 qualities. If I need to define them for you, I'll define them very quickly. Volume is the total number of repetitions in a particular intensity range that you're doing on a daily or weekly basis. Intensity refers to the percentage of your 1 rep max that you're working with on average. Frequency refers to the number of times per week you are performing a particular movement. And exertion refers to how close to failure you're on average working on a given work set. Look at those 4 qualities and ask yourself, is my programming low or deficient in any of those 4 qualities, okay? And then look for other programs or rewrite your programming so that you increase, I would say a modest increase is usually best, at least to start. You increase one of those 4 qualities, okay? So if you're doing something like West Side Barbell, which is lower in volume, at least for the main movements, and higher in intensity, look at something that perhaps is higher in volume and lower intensity, and then try that out, okay? So try some sort of different combination of volume, frequency, intensity, and exertion, and try it out for a few months and see if that different combination works for you. Another way to try and figure this out or tease this out is go onto training logs, look at YouTube videos, look at people who are at similar strength levels as you, look at their programming and ask yourself, what are they doing with their programming that I'm not doing with mine, okay? And that will give you a great deal of information that you can take with you and use to modify your own programming, okay? All right, so you're pretty certain you're not overreacting, you're pretty certain it's not a physical issue, and you're pretty certain your programming is fine. The next question that I ask, and this is oftentimes the first question that people ask, but for me it falls pretty far down the line because even if these things aren't ideal, you should still be able to make good progress. The next question that you have to ask is, what is my diet and what is my recovery like? Okay. Regarding your diet, what do my macros look like? All right. Do I need to manipulate my macros in order to continue to get stronger? Am I getting enough calories? Okay. If you're operating on a deficit and you're not making progress, well, you need to refer yourself back to question number one, which is, am I overreacting? Am I being too greedy and or impatient? Okay. If you're operating on a deficit for no good reason, there's no reason behind it. You're just lazy with your eating habits. You need to eat more calories. Okay. You need to eat more calories in order to continue to get stronger. But look at your diet. Look at what you're eating. Okay. Can I make improvements on my diet? Can my diet be changed in a qualitative level? Oftentimes on strength forums, people are concerned with changing your diet on a quantitative level, just increasing calories, but also think about your diet qualitatively, okay? Because your performance is going to be a reflection of the fuel that you supply your body with, okay? So think about what you're eating and think about whether or not you need to make changes to that diet in order to continue to get stronger. Usually the answer is no, because usually people can get stronger just by massing a certain amount of calories, regardless of where those calories are coming from. But it's worth taking another look at your diet and being honest and objective about what improvements can be made in it. If not your diet, look at recovery. Am I getting enough sleep? Is my sleep quality sleep? Okay? You need to ask yourself those questions as well. Also related to recovery, am I doing the work outside of training that I need to do in order to be prepared for the next training session? All right. Am I allowing myself to recover by taking the sort of supplementation that will allow me to recover? All right. And that could just mean a daily vitamin and a fish oil pill or whatever, leafy greens, whatever you want to do to try and recover between training sessions. Are you doing that work? Okay. Are you doing the sort of SMR work, the sort of self-myofascial release work that needs to be done in order to recover between training sessions, okay? Are you putting enough effort into recovery? That's a question that you need to ask yourself. And if the answer is no, then you need to start to change that.